talk about giving a voice to the voiceless, which is something that has been popularized throughout American history when it comes to discrimination or racist practices. The fact of the matter is that being silent or just operating behind the scenes, although that can be productive, you have to speak out at some point. At least somebody does. And the reality is that when it comes to black coaches in the NFL as well as in the National Basketball Association, they're few and far between. Avery Bradley and Kyrie Irving are guys that I'd like to give credit to in the offseason before bubble play, because they were trying to bring attention to the paucity of black coaches in the National Basketball Association because the numbers were dwindling before our very eyes and we didn't hear anything. That's always been the case in the National Football League. As of right now, the year is 2021. There are 3 black head coaches. 3. That's it. Mike Tomlin, Brian Flores in Miami, and of course David Culley, who's the new head coach for the Houston Texans, who's been in the league for 27 years before he got a head coaching job. Robert Saleh for the Jets, he came over as a defense coordinator from the San Francisco 49ers to get the head coaching job, born in Michigan, raised of Lebanese descent, Lebanese parents, what have you. Not African-American, but nevertheless it's a minority hire. Of course, the previous year, Ron Rivera, well-respected and recognized, got hired in the nation's capital by the Washington football team, but he was the only minority hire the year before that. The league is 70% black. It's a multi-billion-dollar establishment. They're talking about how this league could generate in excess of $25 billion a year, at least before the pandemic. That's what they were talking. And yet, considering how popular this league is, nothing has happened. And no player says anything about it. The millions upon millions of dollars that they're making, the way they're set and their generations are set, somehow, some way, nobody has the courage to open their damn mouths and speak out about it. If you remember, Max, I brought this up when it came to even Colin Kaepernick. When Colin Kaepernick took a knee, okay, everybody was in an uproar coming to his defense because he had been marginalized, because he had been essentially blackballed. Well, guess what? I got a slew of black coaches that could say this has been happening to them for decades, but no player said anything. And my last point, Max, Mike Tomlin has been in the National Football League for 14 years as a head coach. His record is 145. 78-1. He's won 65% of his games. Max Kellerman, are you aware of any of his assistants who've been hired?
Good point.
But Sean Payton got a tree, and Andy Reid got a tree, and Sean, and the list goes on and on. Sean McVay. They got trees. They got proteges. They got folks sprinkled throughout the league getting jobs. Zach Taylor. No disrespect. Wish him nothing but the best in Cincinnati. He got a job there. Okay? Where he come from? All I'm just saying is you just look at it, and it's like the unfairness is so flagrant. It's disgusting. And black players should be speaking up. Yes. Long time ago.
Well, I agree. I think players, black and white, should be taking the lead here, as LeBron James and Chris Paul and others have done in the NBA. Let's keep in mind what we're dealing with in the NFL, though, Stephen A. Colin Kaepernick, and I mentioned this years ago while it was going on. Remember we did the show in L.A. with Snoop and Magic? Colin Kaepernick was kneeling broadly. Narrowly, it's injustice in terms of law enforcement interactions with communities of color. But broadly, it's about systemic racism, right? And he hasn't had a job since then. He's been drummed out of the league. Unjustly, doesn't have anything to do with his play, right? So that's what the NFL does if you make too much noise about that issue. Now, you might argue, well, the way Kaepernick went about it, he touched the third rail, at least in terms of the NFL and their business, and there are ways of doing it without burning everything down. We could argue about that, but okay, let's say I concede that point. Yes, players should take the lead, but the power structure is completely imbalanced. The reason, I think primarily that we see this, is there's virtually no minority ownership in the NFL. And is that because the NFL is systematically kind of excluding or rejecting the attempts of minorities to own teams? Or is that because of our country's original sin? You really want it. There's enormous economic inequity in this country based on the fact that black people were once slaves And not only have there never been reparations made, but in which they are due, which African Americans are due, in my view, and would be better for us societally. But in addition to that, post-slavery, they were also systemically, excluded from the economy in many ways. And so at least the parts of the economy you want to be involved in. And so that's really what we're talking about. The NFL is a reflection of the country in generally. But more specifically, even when you factor that in, 3 African-American head coaches in a league that's 70% African-American? Yes, I think that the league should make this one of its priorities, Stephen A., along with making money. Obviously, that's always going to be their priority, and player health, because that could be something that could affect their business long term. I think this issue can also affect their business because it's beyond the pale at this point.
Well, you've got white owners who hire people who look like them and they're more comfortable with, and we know the code language that they usually use to justify it. That's number one. Number two, you're essentially saying that you don't trust black men to be a leader of men, particularly of men who look like them and share their cultural black background. You don't respect it. You don't trust it. All right. You're more comfortable when you're playing that leadership role, which speaks to the kind of things that you just alluded to, Max Kellerman. And I don't bring up Zach Taylor to knock him. I wish him nothing but the best, along with others. But the reality is, when you look at the job that Eric Bieniemy has done, excluding this Super Bowl performance against Tampa Bay, the bottom line is that this is the 3rd year in a row that he's had a top-rated offense and he can't get a job. He can't get a head coaching job. And then you look at the fact that in Kansas City, even though he's designing the offense, Andy Reid is calling plays half the time, that's being held against him. But in the end, what it comes down to is what I've said repeatedly on this show, and I'll close by saying this. When George Floyd had that knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and people throughout this nation were lamenting what they saw, what I said to folks when you saw black folks protesting in the streets throughout America was that when people talked about they had enough is enough, they ain't just talking about brutality on the part of some police officers against unarmed black men. You were also talking from a figurative perspective in corporate America and other places where black folks continuously feel like we have that knee on our neck. We're marginalized, we're pigeonholed, we're diminished in a lot of different ways and not held with the same regard, and the level of meritocracy that's supposed to be taking place doesn't exist for us. And this is just the latest example. And the fact that black athletes who are elite and well paid don't have either the courage or the sensitivity to speak up about it, leaving it to folks like me and a few others, and you as well, Max, is a damn shame. They make enough money. The dollars are guaranteed. They don't have to worry about it. Open your damn mouth. You speak about everything else, especially on Twitter and Facebook and all that other stuff. Where the hell are you? Open your damn mouths and speak up and show some damn courage.
Facts. We'll leave it on that note. Speaking of someone that does open their mouth and is very involved with social activism, that would be LeBron James. Another superstar